welcome back to RAGNAROK Primitive Playthrough. So this is going to be days 11 through 20 of my 100-day challenge. And right there you see me circling on the map where the different artifacts are, and then I cross out the ones I already did. Now that one is going to be updated. It kind of looks weird right now. I'm going to move the map and update it later. But now we're going to head toward the Sightless Cave. And the Sightless Cave has gotten a big upgrade since the Survival Evolved version of this map. Now I'm taking my Bison and my I cannot pronounce it. I end up naming him Toph. And yes, I know Toph is a female character, which is why I name him Toph, but male. And then the Bison I end up naming Ginger. Of course, that might be later. I don't know if it's now here in the current footage you are seeing. I am still traveling to the Sightless Cave. It is still in the swamp below what I call Castle Shrade. Now then, as we enter into the cave, you'll notice that it doesn't turn pitch black like it used to. Instead, it is lit with various bioluminescent mushrooms, something you would see out of the Aberration map, as well as a bunch of glowing crystals. Now, if you're watching this and you've seen the first episode, or this is going to be the giant amalgamated video for the 100 days at the end of when all of this is recorded, you'll notice that the artifacts that are not in the proper dungeons, and by proper dungeons I mean like the jungle temple or the ice cavern, the ones that are out in the world, the artifacts are not spawning for whatever reason on my server. So as you saw there was a location of one of the artifacts. I am currently heading to the second artifact location. Now, I am showing that I am going to the artifact locations to prove that I would have gotten it anyway, and then I am spawning them in just simply for the fact that it's bugged and there's no natural way of me getting it. And you can see on the map, I have all of them labeled on my map so I know exactly where they should be. And right there, we got a little sleepy dinosaur. I cannot for the life of me remember what they're called. I just know that it's one of the 10 dinosaurs that start with the word mega. Anyway, once I finish up gathering the artifacts, I head home, only to get mobbed by a bunch of Microraptors. God, I wish I could just, spawn block Microraptors. I hate them so much. Anyway, I head on home, I start cooking up some prime meat, and by the way, that is one of the mods that I've added to the server. I've added a lot of mods, and one of them is so I can stack prime meat and prime fish meat, as well as mutton. So it's not going to be single stacks, because I hate that. I don't even know why it's like that in the first place. So I stack up all my prime meat, get them cooking, and I put away my artifacts. Now then, it is time to start planning out my expansion for my base. I'm going to be expanding out my house as well as making a barn and a docks, and then I'll be building on top of that later on, but for now we want to get the foundations in. So for the rest of this night, I'm going to be gathering up a bunch of wood, fiber, stone, you name it, so I can start building. I use tools for a lot of it, and then I use my Bison for the rest of it. The Bison is primarily going to be holding most of the materials, so I could just grab and go as I start to build. Now then, going into day 12 is when I start to build. Right there, that's going to be the foundation of my farm. So it's going to be a two-part farm. One is going to have crops, and one is going to have just, regular animals. I plan for sheep, Phiomia, and other things as well. I also plan to have dodos for eggs. Of course, I'm going to make their own little dodo coop. Now, I'm going to be starting off with 4 plots for right now because I don't have enough supplies or materials to make a bunch of larger plots. When clearing out all of the brush around this area, I got plenty of seeds for the various crops that you can grow, so that's going to be no issue. My big issue right now is going to be gathering up all the poop because I don't have enough being produced, really, in order to keep a lot of these crops alive. It'll be just enough to kind of get enough to start off with, but that is the primary reason of why I need to go tame a Phiomia. And right there, you're going to see the start of my docks. I have it where you come out here, the boat is going to be right there at the edge, and then I have this nice little staircase that goes up in a circular fashion with a little balcony in the middle. I thought it was very stylish. Now, that pretty much takes up most of day 12. It took quite a long time to build everything. So, going into day 13, you can see my crops have now started to grow, but I am having trouble keeping them all alive because I don't have any fertilizer, and I'm, again, not producing enough poop in order to keep them alive. I'm doing what I can, but I'm really struggling, so we're definitely going to have to get this solved relatively soon if I want to keep my crops going. And then, because I am doing a primitive playthrough, I'm not going to have any refrigerators coolers or any of that kind of stuff, the cryo fridges. Nope, we're gonna go strictly with preserving bins, which means I need a lot of spark powder. Luckily, spark powder is easy enough to get. Right there, I am looting a supply crate. This is going to be my primary source of gathering good gear. Now, in the last episode, I tried and failed at taming a griffin because I guess I just didn't have enough arrows and my bow kept breaking with not enough supplies in order to keep repairing it. So this time, I am prepared. I know what to expect. I go back out on Ginger and I head to what I call the Griffin Grounds, which is just past the Great Bridge. On the way there, I found a Gigantopithecus. I decided to tame him and name him John II. If you've watched my Appalachian playthrough, I had a Gigantopithecus called John, and he was actually there for most of the playthrough until one of the boss battles killed him. So this is going to be John II. Now that I'm at the Griffin Grounds, I find a really pretty gold-colored one, and I start to tame it with my trank arrows. It takes quite a long time because the trank arrows, while they can work, they are not the best thing to use for a griffin. Really, you want to use the guns and trank darts and stuff like that, but we're not using that for this playthrough. Eventually, it gets to the point where he becomes weak enough that he starts running away, which is a normal interaction for dinosaurs that you're trying to tame. When they get low enough, they just try to run away from you. Anyway, he goes all the way up into the mountains. I'm chasing up into the snow, which becomes a bit of a hazard for me because I start to take freezing damage. So during the taming process, once he finally goes down, I have to leave into the grasslands and wait for him to tame, coming up periodically to check on him. It took a while actually to tame him, and then when that was all said and done, I start heading home, only to realize behind me, while I saw John, I didn't see my new griffin. I noticed that he was attacking a bunch of Argentavis, 2 of them to be exact. This absolutely scared the shit out of me because I tried using my bow to kill the Argentavis up in the air until my bow broke because of the usage I got out of taming the griffin. So that meant it was up to fate whether my griffin was about to live or die. And it, again, scared me because you could see how his wings are all broken. He was already low health, but miraculously he lived and killed both of the Argentavis with barely any health left. I had to force feed him a bunch of meat in order to give him just enough health to last the rest of the trip back home. Now, it took quite a while to head home, especially because I had to keep stopping for the Gigantopithecus to catch up to us, which would lead into day 14, during which I was traveling through the upper end of the jungles, where we're going to encounter the Sunken ruins in the lake bed. This is one of the locations of the artifacts. Now, I'm not going to be able to get the artifact right now because it is deep underwater. Now, I did give an attempt to see if I possibly could get to where it would be without using Lazarus Chowder, but I am gonna have to use it or find some sort of diving dinosaur like the, I don't know what it's called, but the salamander dude, so we're gonna have to return to this location later. I finally make it back home and I drop off Ginger as well as John II, and I'm going to take out my griffin and ride him for the first time. Now, something that I've noticed that is kind of odd is that when I go to dive with the griffin, it absolutely tanks my FPS. Now, right there, it wasn't as bad as I normally get, so you're not going to see a lot of footage of me diving or flying with the griffin because it just absolutely tanks my frames, but right there was good enough for you to at least get a little taste of what it is. I flew him around the map because the griffin is the optimal way of traveling quickly on this map with his diving and speed capabilities. I check out the Wyvern Cove as well as some other areas before I finally head back home. Now, this pretty much lasted the rest of the day. As I get back home, it is nighttime and I decide to make myself some Lazarus Chowder so I can go back up to the jungle ruins and get that artifact. As day 15 rolls around, I go ahead and hop onto my griffin because, again, the griffin is the fastest way to pretty much travel this entire place. I have my Lazarus Chowder all ready and I head back up to the Sunken ruins. Now, the Sunken ruins, there isn't really a lot of enemies in this area. Sometimes you can find piranhas, but it's more rare than others. But you can find otters. Now, an otter is definitely something I want to tame because look right there, I have heat stroke as well as the overheating debuff, so having an otter will help mitigate that. It's also good to have it for when I eventually go into the ice cave. Now then, I take my Lazarus chowder and I swim down into the depths. The depths of this little ruin go pretty deep, and there are two branching ends. Of course, you don't really need to go into them because there's nothing really there. You would have seen the artifact by now if it had spawned on your server, and just like all the other ones, it did not spawn for me. But showing you right there that I did reach the end, I go ahead and spawn it back in before I head back out, where I locate an otter and quickly tame one. And I'm going to be naming this one Floof II, just like the other otter I had in the Appalachian playthrough. I go ahead and mark it off my new map. As you see there, it's a little bit new and improved. That's because I replaced the old map with the new one, so I had to redraw all of them. But since I am on a roll, I might as well get one more artifact for today, and that's going to be this one in the canyon. You're going to see this giant rock structure with a spring well. Now, if you land on it, you'll see that the well goes pretty deep, but if you swim all the way to the bottom, you should find the other artifact. Now, this one you don't need the Lazarus chowder for. You can just swim down in, and you should be able to make it back up before you run out of air. And again, just like all the other ones, I'm gonna have to repeat this again. I did not see it, so I'm gonna have to spawn it in, but you can see clearly that I did make it to the bottom, so I would have gotten it anyway. So I swim back up before I lose out on all of my oxygen, and I proceeded to head home and mark it off of the map. That's gonna be the end of this day. Now, because this day was filled with finding artifacts and going on adventures, I feel that the next day, day 16, should be spent building up my base. As I've already started, might as well continue. So then, I go ahead and I start putting down some stone foundations, and I get to work building my barn. Now, I want my barn to be open. I don't want it to be just a giant square structure. So what I do is I start off with the stone foundation. I then place some wooden pillars at the corners, one square high wooden wall as a fence, and then I put in the railing to give it a little bit of texture. Now right there you see me lining up my dinosaurs because I'm trying to parse out how far apart I need to put the fences in order to make the stalls for the dinosaurs to be in. Right there you see me putting up the back wall, and then I'll put the fence on afterward. I'm lining up all my dinos into what will be their stalls. They're not going to be coded to each individual one. I just kind of want them in there so I know that they will fit, as well as some additional dinos when I do eventually tame more. I have to go back eventually and continue grinding some stone, making more foundations as well as fences, and then I head back to continue building. Right there, I'm putting in more of the wall, and eventually I will go off of the pillars, I'll make the roof, and I'll add more railing to give it more of an accent. Now, the top of the roof is going to be completely flat because that's going to be my landing for all of my flying dinosaurs as well as my griffin. Now, right there, you see me landing my griffin. The roof is still a little bit too narrow. I'm going to have to expand that out later on, but for now, it'll be fine for just the griffin. And then, as you see here, I'm showing you that I have this little opening that I could walk in my dinos and place them exactly where I want them to without having the need of backing in. Of course, I back in a little bit there just to get it nice and straight, but it looks perfect. This is exactly what I was trying to go for. I even made a little staircase to go up into the roof where the flyers will be. Now, this right here is going to be where I start naming all of my dinos. I named this one Ginger, as I mentioned before. I named the Griffin Dorado because it is a golden color, so he's going to be named the Golden, and I go around and start naming everybody else. That's going to be the end of day 16. Now for day 17, I decided to sail all the way to the grasslands. It's a little bit dark because I was actually sailing all night into the morning. It's going to be light pretty soon here. Anyway, I decided I needed another bison because even though I don't want to have like an army of bison, I want to have a male in order to breed them for the bison milk that is a new item to the game. Now then, I was looking for a male and I stumbled upon a female that was in the rocks that scared the shit out of me, and then she called in all of the other ones, so there was two females and a male now chasing after me. You could definitely tell that the male is different because his horns are twice as large as the females. It's almost comically sized. Anyway, yeah, he's playing a little cat and mouse with me here as I try running away. He gave me a good stare down before trying to charge into me again. I eventually pulled out my crossbow and began loading him up with trank arrows. Now, because I have better gear than I did last time, it wasn't hurting nearly as much, though I did get about half health. Eventually, I did tame him up just like the other one, and I headed him back to the docks that I built in the last episode. Now then, I don't want to risk trying to run him up onto the boat like I did last time, because that one was kind of sketchy. So instead, I put down a forge and I make myself a smithy, and I begin to mine all of the metal and farm up a bunch of resources in the area. The plan is I'm going to be making him a saddle so I can ride him onto the boat instead of hoping he will follow me. Now, I have pretty much every material available to me except for the cementing paste. Luckily, the island just outside of the grasslands has a beaver dam that I could steal the cementing paste from. Of course, then you get onslaught by a bunch of beavers. Now, the beavers pretty much break all of my armor. All I'm left with is my boots and gloves, so I run all the way back to the docks naked. Well, you know, of course, I have floof on me, which gives me a little bit of coverage from the elements. But anyway, we're going to be going into day 18 because I have to wait for all of the metal that I had mined up to cook in the forge. So while I waited for that, I headed a bit north to where the Megalania spawned just outside of the volcano region. I do need the Megalania toxins in order to summon the boss battle later on, so this is a good chance to get a head start on it. Luckily, you can sometimes get them to drop 2 instead of just 1. Anyway, I finally got all of the resources required and I made the Bison saddle. I decided to take him out for a little bit of a spin and I ran around the grasslands for a while. Don't worry about his health there, I just, put a little bit of experience points into his health so he looked low health. I go to the old farm, which this area used to be a little bit more built up in the older version of the map, but now it's basically nothing at all. I almost didn't even recognize it as the old farm, but you can still find crops such as carrots and potatoes. You can find them all over the grassland, but right there it's easier to spot. Now then, I hop back onto the boat, I got the Bison loaded up, and I sail home. Once I get home, I hop onto Toph, and I swim towards this blue loot crate in order to see what's inside, but that's not the reason I'm here. I really want to tame a deinosuchus. Now, sometimes they can spawn in this area. If you cannot find them because this is a smaller swamp area, it is better to go to the larger swamp, but I do manage to find one. And yeah, it's a little bit tricky because this area is so narrow. I popped some mutton into its mouth because I did have some left over from the first time I went to the grasslands and I killed that sheep, and it gave it a good chunk of taming experience. Of course, then it started chasing me, so I hopped onto Toph as my getaway mount, and I quickly run into the cave in order to hide from the deinosuchus, which did work for the first time. I go back out and I feed the deinosuchus one more time, only for it to start following me again, so I head back into the cave. Only this time it followed me into the cave. Luckily not for long, but now I'm gonna have less of an area to run if I need to, so I hope that this last one works out. She only needs one more mutton in order to tame, so I go ahead and I test my luck. Luckily, it tamed the deinosuchus. This is pretty much my favorite dinosaur, because if you haven't noticed before, I'm pretty much an alligator from Florida. So having a massive alligator or crocodilian in general, those are always going to be my biased favorites. Now then, I decide to head all the way back home with my heat stroke getting even worse. As you notice that it's now turned into the yellow and slowly progressing into the orange. If you did not know, when you have the heat stroke debuff, it will transition from white all the way to red, red being the worst it can get. So that's why my screen is very fuzzy and blurry, because I'm pretty much in the middle stage of it being yellow to orange. Now I head all the way to the snow peaks nearby, seeing if it would help get rid of the debuff faster. I don't really know if it does, because I've noticed sometimes that it's gone away faster when I'm in a colder environment and other times it doesn't. I don't really know the science behind that. Just let me roleplay it out of taking an ice bath after getting really hot. Once I got back home after the debuff left me, I got onto the deinosuchus with a saddle that I found from a loot crate early on, and I take it out for a spin. Now, something that is different, I don't know if this is because This is the new, I would say, official deinosuchus rather than the modded version, but I've noticed that when you try to swim straight down or straight up, it actually goes like slow, like you cannot use your sprint ability. But if you swim straight, you can sprint. Now then, once I was done taking it out for a spin, I head back and I tame a Lystros something, I don't really know how to pronounce it, and I named him Taco. The reason why I tamed one of these guys is because when you pet them, they provide an AoE buff that allows for faster passive experience gain. So if I have him in my stable, pet him every so often, it will help all of my dinos gain passive levels, so I don't really have to take them out all of the time in order to level up. Of course, it's always beneficial to level them up naturally, but at least this way, it's not going to be as bad as if I just ignored them completely. We are getting towards the end of episode 2 as we progress into day 19, and this day I'm going to be spending building up my house. So I moved around a lot of the furniture in order to make room, and I expanded it forward as well as off to the side. Now, because the rock that I am building my base on is a little bit uneven, you'll notice that I did something clever. I have this little bit of a rise up into my base. So when you first walk in, you have an opening area, and then you have to walk down the stairs to get into the quote-unquote living room, and then if you go off to the right will be my bedroom. Now, I'm going to be expanding this a little bit further on into the day, but for right now, it's livable. I still have to move those storage units up onto that little ledge there in my bedroom, but again, for now, it is usable. This pretty much takes up the entire day because it takes quite a long time to build all of the necessary foundations, walls, etc., and place them in the proper location. I also had to experiment a lot, so yeah, this pretty much took the entire day. I end the day 19 by placing torches and filling them up with spark powder, so I don't have to ever worry about them running out. Now, I don't really like the deep orange glow. That will be fixed later on, but not in this episode. For now, for the final day, I take my griffin out and we're heading towards the swamps. A mild detour though, as there is a brand new island just off the coast of where the swamps are. This island is pretty much like the grasslands. It has pretty much the exact same tames as well. Again, more flat, which is always a plus because I don't like a lot of elevation. But then after my sightseeing, I head to the swamps where I'm trying to look for a Dimetrodon. I eventually find one, only to realize that the griffin cannot carry a Dimetrodon. So what the hell? Yeah, the entire purpose of me trying to find a Dimetrodon is so that later on I can raise up wyvern eggs. Dimetrodons are pretty much like an AC unit, but without having to use electronics, so it'll be perfect for my primitive playthrough. Right there, I stop at the blue obelisk because I'm trying to see what I need in order to summon the boss. Again, I am only going to be focusing on doing the beta boss. I am not interested in doing the alpha boss, only for the reasons of aesthetic purposes, because for an ice dragon, I like blue better than I like red. Anyway, I head on home to find one of the sleeping dinosaurs next to my base. I don't know when or where it came from, but it's got babies, so as tradition dictates, we're going to kill the parent and tame the babies. So I ride on up with the griffin and I shoot it full of arrows. Now, I don't exactly know what I was doing here in this footage. I could have just swiped it with the griffin and killed it. I guess I was just trying to kill it with the bow, but because the griffin is so clumsy, it was kind of awkward to get that shot off there. But eventually I do pull it off and I tame the babies and feed them the meat of their dead mother. Yep, this is Ark for you. After I lead both of the babies back home, I name them both Dreamy and Sleepy respectively, because again, they're sleepy dinosaurs. I don't really plan on using them in combat, they're just gonna be pets really, but I really need a Phiomia, and the reason is because Phiomias, well, they poop a lot, and I really need to expand my farm because I'm not getting enough crops out of the 4 that I had placed earlier in this episode. So I eventually find one near Castle Shrade. For some reason, when you want a Phiomia, you cannot find them anywhere, but when you don't need them, they're everywhere. That's just how life works, I guess. Now, this is where I get into a little bit of trouble. So I wanted to take him home, but of course we're on the other side of the bay. I figured, oh, it should be okay to take a shortcut and swim across the bay. And as I go to do that, I see a single shark start to swim toward us. No problem, I've got my sword, I go and kill the shark, only to then see another shark slowly approach. Alright, no problem, as long as my Phiomia can get across, it'll be fine. But then we start to see more sharks, and now they are starting to do a lot of damage to me. They are destroying my armor, and the Phiomia is starting to take damage. I actually got pretty worried because the Phiomia got very close to dying. I was like, oh no, not after all of that taming and heading it back home. So I quickly turn around and swim to the shore. Hopefully the Phiomia would follow me and not try to fight the sharks. Luckily, that was the case, and the Phiomia did manage to make it across, because I've had other times where that was not the case, to my frustration. Yeah, that was a gamble, and I'm surprised that I won on that. But now with the Phiomia, I am getting plenty of poop. So now, I am actually getting enough to keep my crops alive, because as you saw there, they were pretty much dead and dying, because I didn't have enough to go around. Now I've got plenty, though I'm still missing a single component. I need a dung beetle. So, I'm heading back toward the Sightless Cave to try to look for a dung beetle who will collect all of the poop and turn it into fertilizer, which will be much more efficient. And in combination with the Phiomia, it will allow me to expand my farm far beyond what it is now. Now, if you ever do go into the Sightless Cave, definitely the griffin is your best bet. Flying over all of the hazards and obstacles, it makes it so much easier. I don't even know why I brought the bison to begin with. I could have just waited until I got the griffin and flown in. Now then, I did see dung beetles originally when I had gone through here for the artifacts, but this time around I did not see any at all, which means I'm gonna have to go to the desert in order to get one. But that's not gonna be today, as this is the end of day 20, which means this is the end of episode 2. So then, if you liked this episode of my primitive playthrough of the RAGNAROK map on the Ascension game, please like this video, subscribe if you want to see more of this RAGNAROK playthrough. I also have a playthrough of the Appalachian map and other video games. Check that out, and I'll see you next time. Florida Gatorman out.